Standing in front of me in a dress I'd never seen her wear, Chris, my wife, asked, "Does this make me look fat?" Being an old hand at fielding such questions, I responded, "No, dear, you look more lovely than usual," which one would think in and of itself was an impossibility. Letting out a peal of girlish laughter, the kind of laugh that had been one of the many things I found so attractive about her, my wife leaned in to kiss my cheek, but faded away before she could. Hey, when she's happy, I'm happy. It had been a little over a year since Chris had died from cancer, and there's not a day that her ghost does not appear before me. Typically she'll ask me or tell me something we'd spoken about when she was still alive. I miss my wife. Yesterday, when she'd paid me another visit, Chris began by telling me, "You know, it's been a while since we had the Shantzes over for dinner. You should call Gus and invite him and Lorraine over to the house this Friday." "What? You want to try killing them with your cooking again?" I teased. Chris was never much of a cook, although she did tirelessly try. It was just that pots and pans were not her best friends, and ovens and burners must have had it out for her, because she not only burned the food, but would inevitably finish cooking whatever she attempted to cook with a new burn or blister somewhere on her hands or arms. Again she laughed, then said, "But if you don't mind, please don't open a bottle of wine. You know how Lorraine gets after a few glasses." "Not a problem, my love. Your presence is always intoxicating enough for me," I replied. This was true, and I know it's corny, because I like just about everything about my predeceased spouse. And once more, like yesterday and all the days since my wife passed away, she faded from existence before having the time to plant another one of her wonderful kisses on my always ready to be kissed by her cheek. I not only hated that she was dead and gone, but that when her apparition returned for these all too short visits, it would only stay for seconds, and there was so much I wanted to tell her before she'd fade away again, and that I should have told her while she was still alive. So very much. Sure, I used to tell my wife how much I loved her and how much I cared. It was just I never took the time, while we both had it, to tell her as simply as I could the meaning of having her in my life each day. I should have told her while she was alive, and during these frustratingly limited visits, all the things I neglected during the all too short span of her life with me. But there just never seemed to be enough time to put into words and spit it out for her to hear. I wasted so much of that time cracking jokes and trying to make her laugh, or spent too much time talking about things that, when I now look back, just really didn't matter. I never found the way to tell her, that is until now, just how much she meant to me. So here's the plan. The next time her ghost visits me, I want to say to Chris the most important 3 words I've ever spoken to anyone at any time. Some won't understand the significance of the phrase I plan to say. That's okay, because I know she'll get the message behind that trio of words when I share them. Keep doing you. I just need to be sure Chris hears them before her spirit fades forever. I guess that the way Chris and I met was the way many couples do, by chance. Maxine and I had called it quits after being together for the last 5 years. She kept the apartment, and I moved out of our moderately sized 2-bedroom home in the Upper East Side of Manhattan to a cramped studio cracker box on the Lower West Side. That would have been about March 2007, if I'm not muddling up the date, which I'm more than likely to do now at my age, which meant I was then 53. I'm now 67, and Chris died from cancer going on 2 years now. Her twin daughters were born 18 years ago. Both girls just entered college but still live in our home, which is a welcome blessing for this old widower. When Chris died in 2019, the 3 of us were devastated. I tried to do my best not to let them know at the time just how much I wished I'd simply passed on the same day Chris did. Yet, as any widowed parent will tell you, there are days where you thought you simply could not continue for another minute carrying on with a daily and empty facade of stoicism and strength. But the girls were only 16 years old, and grieving at least as much as I was then. So I somehow managed to take one breath after another, place one foot in front of the other, and step by step to carry on. May I introduce you to Chris's daughters? Like their mother, both girls have beautiful Titan red hair and green eyes. Depending on the lighting at any given time of the day or night, and once again like their mothers, their Titan red hair could appear to be flaxen dark blonde, and their eyes shifted to deep hues of hazel. And oh God, not a single day goes by that I still don't miss the deceased mother of my stepdaughters. Their names are Anya and Noika. Anya's the older of the two, having only been born a few minutes before Noika followed her into this world, almost the way the nearly inseparable two navigate the world now. Wherever Anya leads, Noika always follows. Chris had been born in Croatia. Her Christian name was Svieta, which in English means flower. When she came to America, and in order to assimilate more fluidly within our society, she renamed herself Chris. Chris's first husband and the twins' biological father, Jan, was born in Poland. Chris's and Jan's daughters were named after each of their respective mothers. Anya means one whom God has favoured. Noika, as Chris told me, was actually a typo on the birth certificate of Jan's mother. The I was accidentally placed in front of the K instead of it following it, as it would be usually found for anyone named Nokia, and the name Nokia implied its bearer was a seeker of knowledge. Jan died in a car crash in 2005 when their daughters were 2 years old, leaving Chris to fend for the family on her own. Now, upon reflection, perhaps it wasn't by chance the way Chris and I met, but by the divine intervention of one who God favoured and the misspelled knowledge seeker. You see, one Saturday in 2007, when I was inside the run-down digs I was then inhabiting on the Lower West Side, softly singing along to my guitar, a song played only for my lonesome self, I heard what sounded like tiny voices outside my studio apartment door singing along. So I sang a little louder. The voices outside also rose in a volume equal to the level of my own. Leaning the guitar against the wall, I went to the door, opened it, and spotted two tiny red-haired girls sitting on the lowest step of the stairs between my landing and the one above mine, looking up at me with their big green eyes. "Please," said Anya. "Play it," followed Noika. Again, this was spoken in unison, and the two then giggled in unison as well. Well, what was I to do except prop the door ajar and move my chair into the open doorway? I then grabbed the guitar before sitting down facing in their direction, and the three of us resumed singing along together again. But this time we sang without the obstruction of the closed door between us. Neither of the little girls knew the lyrics, but that didn't stop them from repeating the words a few beats behind what I'd just sung, or making up their own. They not only sang along with me, but they did it with fortissimo and gusto, far larger than one would have thought could be contained in such small bodies. When we finished that song, I asked if they knew Old MacDonald. Like two synchronised carrot-top bobbleheads, they nodded as they giggled. Yeah, he had a E-I-E-I-O. Once again, each of the girls spoke a word or two, or so, and then in unison by the end of their sentences. So we sang Old MacDonald until we ran out of the animals found on his farm, and it ended with a final, rousing, perfect cadence of E-I-E-I-O. At that point, I heard the door of an apartment on the landing above mine opening, a few footsteps coming down the worn carpet stairs, and I was looking at someone who made my heart skip a beat or two. Chris. "I'm sorry," she apologised. "Are they bothering you?" "No, Mummy, we're helping him sing his songs," they spoke in agreement before adding, which I was now learning, their trademark cascade of girlish giggles. "Mummy likes the music too," once again in conjunction before tittering. "Yeah, Mummy, E-I-E-I-O with us." The pretty red-haired mum took a seat on stairs behind her daughters, placed a hand on each of their shoulders, and then looked at me with a smile, simply said, "Okay." Well, what was I to do except resume the song, with now all four of us E-I-E-I-O-ing, and the occasional laugh or giggle. After we'd sung several songs, Chris stood up and said, "Come on, girls, that was fun, but it's time for your supper, and thank you for keeping these two scary monsters entertained. But before we go, may we ask your name?" "It's Steve," I replied, rested my guitar on the hardwood floor, and then stood up to see them off. "Well, Steve, you've certainly sung for your supper, so if you don't have any other plans, why don't you come upstairs and eat with us? I see you've already been introduced to my Anya and Noika. My name is Chris Wojciech, and it's nice to meet a new neighbour in this old building." Assuming it was simply only a polite but insincere invitation, and not wanting to be an unplanned intruder upon their family's early evening meal, I was about to lie and tell them, "No, I have something I have to take care of. Thank you anyway. Maybe another time." But before those words were out of my mouth, I felt Anya's itsy-bitsy hands wrap around my right one, followed by Noika's wrapping around the other. "And bring up your guitar, 'cause you still got more work to do." Doing as told, and amidst a chorus of excited chattering and laughter, I was led up the stairs by these three wonderful women. Next I walked through their door and into the heart of the most beautiful adventure my soul would ever embark upon. It was a Wednesday evening, and Chris had been in the kitchen preparing dinner for the family. Noika, Anya and I were sitting on the couch together, the girls watching some show on TV, while I, as usual, was engrossed in a book checked out from the library, located 2 blocks from the small home we'd moved into a few years back. Our daughters, both of whom had stopped referring to me as Steve and now called me Dad, had just turned 16. When Chris and I had suggested that they throw a sweet 16 birthday party and invite all their friends over to the house to celebrate the occasion, we were summarily set straight by our teens just being teens. Yeah, why not just kill us and get it over with? They still spoke in that telepathic-like speech pattern where Anya would begin the sentence, Noika would fill in the middle, and the 2 twins would conclude it in unison. It also still amazed me equally as much as I adored hearing their precious patter, but not as much as when I heard them include the word Dad into whatever they were saying. I loved my wife, I loved Chris's daughters, and I loved our family. I had neither ever been so happy, nor could I imagine ever being happier. Life was good. Occasionally from the kitchen we'd hear exclamations of, "Oh, no! Ouch! Ow! Sranje!" That last one is a Croatian word for shit. Chris and I had agreed early on that if we didn't want to raise the children to grow up swearing like sailors in a bar on their first day of shore leave, that we would lead by example and never swear in front of them, or at least not in English. And since I wasn't fluent in Croatian, much less any other language, I now chose Sranje as my go-to curse of choice. That was the only word I was aware of from her native language which she used in front of us when she felt the inclination to sling an expletive or 2 around. I once asked Chris if she ever used any other Croatian obscenities during our last 12 years together. Placing a hand on each side of my face while staring intently into my eyes, she breathlessly whispered, "Steve, what did you think I was saying when we were making love, or when I'd get angry with you? Would you like me to translate now?" "No, dear. Let's just both keep a little mystery in our marriage so as to spice things up a bit, shall we?" When I said things like that, she'd usually laugh that girlish laughter I loved so much, and then kiss me on my always ready to be kissed by her cheek. That woman actually found me witty, and for the life of me, I'll never know why. "Sounds like Mum's fighting again with the pots and pans or the oven," the twins commented from the couch where we sat after one particularly loud utterance of "Sranje!" from the kitchen. "That's just the process your mother employs when her culinary opponents place her in a headlock," I replied, and to which they responded with peals of laughter the way their mum would. We were indeed a family. It was a minute or two after that last oath the three of us were startled by what sounded like a long, loud moan followed by a terrible crash. Running into our kitchen, we found Chris face up on the floor. Her entire body would tense, then relax, as if she were being electrocuted, and each period of tension in between those of relaxation grew more prolonged with every invisible jolt shocking her. At first we all just stood in the doorway, doing nothing, paralysed by confusion and fear. I said nary a word as the sensation of watching something that couldn't be real was freezing my mind to a standstill. And then the twins screamed, "I'll call 911. I'll get Dr. Shantz from next door. Dad, go help Mum, now!" The sound of urgency in their voices jettisoned me into the reality of the seriousness of this situation. Rushing to where Chris was convulsing on the floor, and as I knelt down, I desperately tried to recall whatever I knew regarding helping someone having a seizure. And it was not only precious little to remember, but it had probably been something picked up from watching television or films. The back of her head began slamming against the tiled floor surface, so I held it firmly between my knees to prevent Chris from cracking her skull, or worse. From where I knelt, I could see a large wooden spoon on the tabletop next to us. After grabbing it, I wedged it between her jaws, because I'd heard, but did not know if it was true, you should do that to prevent someone from biting off their tongue. And you know what? The only thought I had while doing all of this was, oh my God, it's the first time I could ever remember Anya and Noika doing anything independent of each other. Anya, who was the first to return to the kitchen, said, 911's on the way, Dad. Should I go and check on Noika and Dr. Shantz? Before I could answer, Noika, along with Gus Shantz, entered the room. It was wonderful to have a doctor and a good drinking buddy who lived next door when you have an emergency. Even before Gus could inquire, Anya reiterated the information about the awaited ambulance. He then asked for details that led to this event, of which we had precious few to share. Being a proficient practitioner, Gus had brought along his large black leather doctor bag, which always appeared to accompany a physician on TV. From another small case within it, he removed a syringe and a small vial. Drawing out a dose of whatever was in the vial, I was instructed to move away, as he then stuck the needle in Chris's neck. In less than a minute she lay unconscious, but appeared to be at rest. Next he checked her pulse, pupils, then heart rate, and by that time Anya and Noika were letting the EMS team into our house. "Steve, go out and stay with the girls. They need you, and we need to do our jobs, so just stay with them in the other room for now." I was about to argue how I wanted to be next to my wife, but before I could, Lorraine, who was Gus's wife, had arrived. Taking me by the hand, I was led into the room where Chris's daughters sat silent and pale. "Don't worry, girls. Dr. Shantz will take good care of your mum," Lorraine told them. "Now tell me, what happened?" "She was cooking supper. Heard a sound and a crash. Then we found her on the floor." "Steve, do you know anything else?" "Oh, God." Chris had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer about 6 months ago. She'd been undergoing therapy. Blessedly, she had few side effects, outside of a bit of exhaustion, and 1 or 2 minor issues her oncologist told us were normal during treatments, and that the lack of other adverse effects were a good sign. "Sranye, Dad, why didn't you or Mum say any? What the fuck were you thinking?" Your mum didn't want us to worry about her, so she made me promise not to tell you. She didn't want to worry anyone, so we told no one, not even the Shantzes." "Well, epic fail, Dad. Fucking epic fucking fail." While we spoke, the EMS crew had gone to their ambulance and returned with a collapsible gurney. As they wheeled Chris out of the house on their wobbly-wheeled collapsible contraption, Gus rejoined us. He told Lorraine to take Anya and Noika over to their place for a while, and I was to go to the hospital with him in his car. Silently, we all did as told, the twins leaving with Lorraine, and me taking the shotgun seat in Gus's red Toyota. Locking our seatbelts, then turning the ignition key to start the vehicle, my friend placed a hand on my left shoulder. With sadness affecting his normally steady tone of voice, he turned to me and said the 6 words that would forever alter my family's life. "Steve, The prognosis is not good. Walking into the apartment for the first time that Chris and her daughters lived in on the floor above mine, I noticed two things. It was clean and well kept, but not overly so. Unlike mine, there was no dust on the tables or other surfaces. There were a couple of toys and children's books here and there on the floor, but the floors, again, unlike mine, were spotless. Yet, like mine, there appeared to be no one else living there with them at the time. Chris told me it'd be a few minutes before supper was on the table, and asked, while adding some finishing touches to the meal, if the girls and I would sing us some more songs. Still remembering the words and chords for Puff the Magic Dragon by Peter, Paul and Mary, I led off with that. In awe, the two red-headed munchkins listened to each verse in silence, but when the chorus had rolled round for a second time, and every chorus thereafter, they knew enough of the words to sing along, and from the not-too-far-away kitchen, with a slightest hint of a southeastern European accent, and in her pleasant mezzo-soprano vocal range, Chris joined us on the choruses too. So I thought, this is what having a family feels like, and I liked how it felt. Puff was followed by old Susanna, next If I Had a Hammer, and then Chris announced supper was ready. On the kitchen table, 4 plates, napkins, cutlery, and glasses had been placed. In the middle was what resembled a baked lasagna, and a tossed salad in a large wooden bowl with oversized wooden utensils, one of which I'd employ years later when Chris was convulsing on the floor of the home someday the 4 of us would inhabit. "Steve, would you like wine with your meal?" "Mummy, if you and Steve have wine, can we have Coca-Cola?" "Well, Steve hasn't said he'd like wine, so that all depends on him, doesn't it?" Caught the look of teasing mischief in Chris's eyes as she'd rested the fate of deciding each age group's beverage for the evening squarely and solely upon my shoulders. Thus I teased in return. "Well, maybe, instead, we should all just drink water." "No, Steve, no. Mummy likes the wine. Drink the wine, drink the wine." With a loud sigh and an exaggerated shrug of my shoulders, what else could I do but say, "OK, wine and Coca-Cola it'll be, I guess." To this the 3 of them showered me with cheers and applause before Chris got up to get a bottle of wine she kept on an upper shelf and away from tiny hands. I mean, what else could this bashful, blue-eyed, often befuddled and bewildered boy from Baltimore do but to acquiesce to the desires of the 3 lovely ladies seated along with me at the table? Returning, Chris handed the bottle to me, and I noticed she was wearing a modest and simple wedding band on the ring finger of her left hand. Then, fishing out a single pop-top can of Coke from the refrigerator, she divided it equally into the girls' 2 empty glasses. I twisted the screw top from the bottle and poured each adult a conservative serving of the alcohol. Holding up her glass to offer a toast, Chris and her daughters exclaimed, "Zivieli!" Well, I didn't know it at the time, but had pretty much surmised it was a foreign word for cheers. I later learned it was Croatian. A serving of lasagna along with a pile of salad greens was then passed first to me, then a plate to Anya, one to Noika, and finally Chris served herself. Looking down at my meal, I noticed that whatever was layered between the broad lasagna strips had spilled out and left the pasta part lying limply like, well, soggy wet noodles on the plate. The steaming tomato sauce, thin as a weak broth, was now drowning and wilting the lower leaves of my salad. The twins, who had been studying me with interest, spoke at once, again albeit somewhat sadly. "Sorry, but Mummy's not such a good cooker." Chris blushed a deep shade of red, a shade much richer than that of her tomato sauce, as she looked down uncomfortably at the table. So what else could I do but put a forkful in my mouth, chew while faking sounds of savouring the food, and then somehow forcing myself to swallow it? Now that's really good. I believe I've never been fortunate enough to have eaten anything tasting better than this. Lucky Mummy, Steve doesn't care what he eats. To this the entire table erupted in laughter, and the momentary tension created had dissipated. Or maybe Steve is just a really good guy with nice manners who doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings by saying things that could, Chris told them as she beamed my way with gratitude. No, in fact, if Noika and Anya aren't going to eat their food and it's okay with your mum, maybe she'll even let me take what you won't eat when I leave so I can have it for breakfast in the morning. With that remark, the identical pair of tiny redheads commenced eating until their plates were clean. Afterwards, their mum said we could all sing her one more song while she did the dishes, but then it would be bedtime for the 4-year-olds. Not knowing how long Chris needed for the clean-up, I suggested we sing a rousing version of 99 bottles of beer on the wall. By the time we were all down to the 18th bottle, she was out of the kitchen and ready to pack the kids off to dreamland. I thought it was also my cue to go back downstairs. Chris then surprised me, which I would learn in the future was something she could often do, by what she said next. Steve, would you mind grabbing what's left of the wine while I put these two rascals down for the night? I rented Pan's Labyrinth from the video store, and if you want to stay a little longer, I wouldn't mind if you watched it with me, and I don't want to finish the wine by myself. But only if you'd like to. Okay, I admit I had some hesitation as I remembered the wedding band, but that ring didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was some absentee husband still in the picture, right? Anyway, what else did I have to do the rest of this night except take my guitar back down to my nearly empty apartment, my completely empty life, and sit all by myself staring at the 4 walls? Plus, after the tots were tucked up, the first thing I'd ask was about the ring and find out if there was a spouse. So, after a quick but heartfelt hug each from Anya and Noika, I replied, "Heard that's a pretty good film, and I've wanted to see it. Sure, I'll grab the wine, so hurry back." After all, what else was a lonesome man living all alone in a lousy, lonely studio apartment to do but take a chance on happiness? Pan's Labyrinth had just begun, and with Chris now sitting beside me, I dove straight into the heart of the matter, which I felt needed resolving. "May I ask you a question?" "Well, you just did." "No, go ahead. What did you want to know?" "I noticed the ring you're wearing," I said as I was looking down at her hand. "Is there a Mr. Wojciech?" "My, that was rather direct." "Well, you strike me as the kind of woman who wouldn't accept anything else than absolute directness." "Touché." Putting the video on pause, Chris looked down, lost in memories for a few moments before continuing. "And in a way there still is, although Jan Wojciech, that was my husband, is dead and buried. He died in an automobile accident when the twins were only 2. I'm sorry." "Why do people always say they're sorry when someone is dead?" "I said that because by asking my question and prying into your life, I made you feel uncomfortable." "Now may I ask you a question?" "Well, you just did." "Touché une fois de plus. You speak French too. Well, if you're from Croatia, you learn fairly quickly that you can't go far in the world speaking only Croatian. Now it's my turn. Why did you ask me that question?" This time it was me looking silently at the floor while grappling with a reply. Making a decision, I chose directness again. "Chris, I know I just met you, Anya and Noika only a few hours ago, and I not only want to just see the 3 of you again, but I'd like to have you all in my life. I'm no homewrecker, so if you and the girls were already with someone, I'd want to know. Maybe I should just leave now." Chris said nothing for several seconds that seemed to last an eternity. At last she picked up the still half-full bottle of wine, held it in my direction and said, "Then stick around, Steve. I'm pretty sure this isn't going to be our last toast to life together." Picking up the remote again, she hit the play button and the video resumed. With those words, she'd answered all my questions completely. At that very instant, I knew that after having met these 3, I would never fall in love with anyone else ever again. Following the speeding ambulance that night, Gus and I drove behind with a sense of frightened, hushed trepidation. Upon arrival, he told me to park the car so he could help the EMS team get Chris checked in, then to go inside and have him paged. I was warned he would not respond to the page until he felt he could leave her side. Since moving into the neighbourhood, he and Lorraine had become our close friends. Gus also had a reputation of being an excellent and caring physician, so this was fine by me. Doing as instructed, and after having Dr. Shantz paged, I was told to take a seat in the hospital waiting room. Besides myself, few others were there too, and they all appeared to be lost in thought within a waiting-to-know world of their own. After more than an hour of waiting, I began to pace back and forth. Even though I had to take a wicked leak, I'd resolved to hold it in to avoid missing any updates on Chris's condition. At precisely 2 hours and 41 minutes later, I heard several frenzied code blue requests, accompanied by a room number being broadcast over the hospital PA system. Once more, recalling questionably accurate information obtained from watching medical dramas seen either in films or on TV, I knew that a code blue meant to get a crash cart stat into the room indicated. Although I still had not been informed as to which room my wife was in, my throat constricted as if a snake had wrapped itself around my neck and was squeezing tighter with each second. The heart that was pounding madly in my chest had elevated my blood pressure to such a high level I was now sweating profusely, and it felt as if the temples at the sides of my head were about to pop and break like a child's cheap toy balloon. Children, Chris's daughters. In all the horrendous excitement, I'd neglected to call and confirm we'd gotten their mother to the hospital. Spotting a bank of payphones within the waiting area, I dropped in some coins and began to dial our home. After 3 unanswered rings, and before the call had gone to our answering device, I remembered Lorraine had taken them over to the Shantz's home. It dawned on me then that I didn't know the number. Using the same word which Anya and Noika had employed to curse me out for not sharing their mum's medical condition with them for the past 6 months, I began to silently berate myself. But it then occurred to me that Dr. Augustine Shantz's number would surely be listed for any of his patients needing to contact him during an emergency. So I called directory assistance to request it. After providing the doctor's name and address, I felt a well of relief rise in my soul when told it was not only listed, but by depositing a little bit more money, the connection would be made for me. This was great because I had neither pen nor paper on which to transcribe the number I wished to call. Fumbling through my pockets for spare change, but coming up 25 cents short, I yelled in desperation to anyone in the room who could hear me. "Please, my wife was just brought in. I need to call our daughters to tell them we got to the hospital. I'm a quarter short on change to have them connect my call, so if anyone will just give me a quarter, I'll give you $1. Damn, I'll give you $100. I just have to call our daughters and before my sentence was complete, a woman grabbed her purse and rushed to my side. The most beautiful 25-cent piece I'd ever seen in my entire life was already in her hand, and as I went for my wallet, she dropped it into the coin slot and said, "No, I won't take your money. Just pay it forward. I hope your family's all going to be fine. Godspeed." Another stranger had now joined us, handing me a ballpoint pen and a scrap of paper torn from the magazine in his hand. He told me to keep them to write their number down for a later call. Oh my Lord, there are indeed angels on earth who walk among us. After a single ring, I heard Lorraine's voice. She knew that unlike her, Chris, Anya, Noika, and just about everyone else in the world, I was a holdout who had never bothered to get a cell phone, one which could store others' numbers. So, Lorraine had sat by her home phone, just waiting for this call to come. My explanation for not wanting to own one was that I'd never stop working if I did, which, in its own way, was absolutely true. But tonight I'd gladly have traded an early death from overwork to have avoided this precarious position I'd placed my family due to my silly aversion to using a mobile device. "Lorraine, are the twins okay?" "They're right here beside me, Steve, and they're as well as can be expected. How's Chris?" In the background I heard Chris's daughters clamouring for any updates about their mother. The ambulance got her here and Gus checked her in. He's still with her, so I haven't heard from him or anyone else yet as to how she is. Have you heard anything from Gus?" By her tight-lipped silence I knew either from the many years of being the wife of a doctor who often attended to emergency situations, or that the girls being so close by that she didn't want them to have to handle any more bad news at this moment. Lorraine simply said, "No." I felt my heart sink lower in my chest as that snake coiled tighter around my throat. Lorraine then turned the receiver over to Chris's daughters. "Dad, how's Mum? Is she going to be... Will Mummy be okay?" "Dr. Shantz is with her now, and when he gives me an update, I'll call you all back with what we know. I had to call directory assistance to get this number, so before hanging up, please tell me what it is so I can write it down." I heard Anya let out a loud, exasperated sigh of frustration as Noika took the phone to recite the Shantz's number, and then made me read it back to her twice to ensure it was transcribed correctly. Returning the receiver to its cradle again, I now spotted Gus walking into the waiting room, and from the exhausted, sad look on his blood-drained face and the crumpled slump of his shoulders, I then knew that this update regarding Chris's prognosis wasn't going to be good news. Frankly, the drive home from the hospital where Chris died was far worse than the drive there. As we'd followed the ambulance earlier, I had hoped, if they hadn't been able to patch up my wife and release her from the emergency room that night, then at least she'd be back home with us after a few days of rest. Hope. As the twins hoped we'd been more honest with them, I'd hoped Chris was being honest with me about just how far along her cancer had progressed. But she didn't want any of us to worry. Those past few months, after receiving lab results indicating cancer had spread to yet another ovary, and the oncologist had been determined it was treatable, she told me she'd undergo therapy. So there was hope. But that was all a lie. Post-mortem, I was allowed to sit in the hospital room next to the corpse of the woman who I had loved more than my own life, and be alone with Chris for one last time, holding her hand. I racked my brains for words to tell my lovely red flower how wonderful she and her daughters had made every day. We four were as one, toasting life, hoping it'd never end. But I said nothing as I toyed with the wedding band on her finger, the one I'd given her after she stopped wearing Jan Wojciech's, shortly following our first toast to life together, our first kiss, the first time we made love, and when we first told one another we loved each other. I hoped I'd die right now here next to my wife. I didn't want to return home to tell Noika and Anya their mother had lost her life to what we didn't share the truth about during all those deceitful months. Tell them by myself, alone, without Chris, without hope. I'm sorry to say this, but truth trumps hope every time, and the truth was Chris had made a decision not to continue treatment over those past months before dying. The truth was the oncologist was alarmed how fast the tumour had grown and how cancer had metastasised to the nearby pelvic organs, her uterus and bladder. The truth was the doctors discovered it had advanced to the lymph nodes and around Chris's aorta as it migrated and spread like wildfire throughout her body, eventually causing pleural effusion. The truth was, my wife and her doctors had met in secret to discuss how it was only a very short matter of time now, and no real hope remained for recovery. The truth was, it was simply time to surrender, to spend those last precious moments at home with family instead of fighting any longer the inevitable death sentence the disease had dealt. Not to forfeit whatever grains of sand still resided in her hourglass of life, sequestered in a hospital room surrounded by doctors and nurses. Either way, cancer would win in the end. Truth is a bitch, and then you die. I'd lost track of how long I'd been silently sitting there, my mind spinning like an overworked turbine, numbly staring at the ring on Chris's finger. When Gus finally returned, I was told the three of us, myself, Gus, and the oncologist, should talk. The oncologist explained how once the para-aortic lymph nodes deteriorated, and when so many organs ceased to function at once, that the body and mind just shut down. He kept on talking, but I'd already stopped listening. What was the point now? At the conversation's end, I was given some pills that would help me relax, or help me sleep, or whatever. Gus then asked for the parking lot ticket and told me he'd bring the car around for the drive home. Home, where I must explain to two girls how they'd lost both their biological father and mother, and were now left to move forward with only their lying stepdad. Explain it all on my own, hoping they'd believe me after I hadn't been completely truthful with them before. Then tell the twins another tall tale about we'd get through this together, so one day it would all be fine. Wondering if I swallowed every single pill I'd been handed, would they possess a potency sufficient to send me into a deep, deep sleep? So deep that when I awakened I'd be with Chris again, forever. As Gus and I drove in silence, I kept asking myself over and over and over again, how did it come to this? During the credit roll following the end of Pan's Labyrinth, and after our first bottle of wine had been depleted, I turned to Chris Wojciech and said, I'm going to go back downstairs now, but if it's all right with you, I'd like if we could do this again. Leaning in toward me, Chris gave me a quick peck on my left cheek, one of the cheeks that was to become my always ready to be kissed by her cheeks, and then whispered a single word, yes. When she walked me and my guitar to the door during our goodbyes in the hall outside, I was rewarded with a brief hug and another kiss on the other cheek. She then whispered the word soon into my ear before I returned to my own apartment. I was so wound up and energised by this unplanned magic we'd just shared, I couldn't sleep at first. So I lay in my bed for a long while and thought about my new friends. When I finally did nod off, the three of them followed me into my dreams, much the same way I had followed them up the stairs. The next day, being a Sunday, I spent it doing something that was highly unusual for me. I gave my home a thorough spring cleaning. By the late afternoon I wanted to escape the residual odours from the cleaning products I'd used inside, so I decided to run some outside errands. Of the half-dozen or so stops I made along my way, one was at a local gourmet shop for some cheese and fancy crackers. The other was at the liquor store for a bottle of wine. Both purchases were made just in case I had unexpected visitors in the near future, which I hoped there would be. As of late, planning for such occasions had become as rare as house cleaning. While in the gourmet shop, I almost bought some candy in the event that there would be more impromptu jam sessions with Anya and Noika in my hallway. But I didn't, because I knew that some parents impose strict rules when it came to their children's diet, particularly foods containing sugar or other items on the health-conscious checklist of do's and don'ts. Not like when I was growing up, and the rule of thumb was we could eat pretty much anything that didn't kill us or require medical attention after consuming. Later in the afternoon, and upon my return, I spotted a handwritten note taped to the door. In 3 different sets of handwriting were the following messages. Steve, please have supper with us tonight. XOXO Anya. Steve, bring up the guitar. XOXO Noika. Steve, please bring some wine. Supper at 6, upstairs. XOXO Chris. Below was a postscript from Noika with their phone number and a short note. Mummy says a girl shouldn't share her number with a guy unless he asks for it, but Mummy said okay, I share it because you're our friend. Perhaps it could have been the remaining fumes from the cleaning products, but more likely it was a result of the 4 lines I'd just read that I may have felt a tear or two well up in my eyes. Since it was nearly 5:30, I only had time for a quick shower and a fast tune-up of my guitar before it was time for my second visit with the Wojciechs. Remembering the request for the wine, I grabbed the bottle I'd just bought. The cheese and crackers still sat on my kitchen counter in the bag provided by the gourmet store, so I thought, why not bring them along for good measure? And no, it wasn't because I'd recalled Chris's failed attempt at baked lasagna from the prior night, for I'd resolved to not only eat in any food she tried to cook and had sat in front of me, but to do my best and enjoy whatever it was, even if it killed me, or required medical attention after consumption. The wine Chris had me open last evening was a screw-top bottle, and the one I picked up today was corked. And because I had no idea if the Wojciechs would have a handy corkscrew lying about, I paused to ponder for a moment. So, just in case, I grabbed the one I owned, along with the wine, adding them inside the cheese and crackers bag. Then I toted the bag, along with my guitar, upstairs at precisely 6 p.m. I do indeed like to be punctual. My soft knock upon the door was welcomed by 2 childish shrieks. "He's here! He's here! Steve's here!" Next, the rattling sound of a chain lock being unlatched was followed by the clicks of the sliding bolt and unlocking locks. When the door swung open, I saw Chris and her daughters standing inside. Noika and Anya each took one of my wrists, since my hands were full, and pulled me into their home. While not a note was coming from the stereo system I'd spotted on my first visit, this sound of the children's giggles was music enough for my thirsty ears. The first thing I noticed was Chris's beautiful red hair had been weaved into a single braid which lay over her right shoulder. Although she looked undeniably lovely the way she wore it loose when we first met yesterday, the styling this evening accented the delicate bone structure of her cheeks, nose and jawline, and tonight I could detect the faint application of makeup on her lips and around her eyes. She was nothing short of drop-dead gorgeous, and for the second time within the last 24 hours, again my heart skipped a beat or two. As opposed to the sneakers, jeans and t-shirt I'd seen her in the other day, Chris was wearing a black skirt that ended an inch or so above the knee, a white short-sleeved silk blouse and a pair of sensible low-heeled dress shoes. Sparkling from her earlobes was a pair of small earring studs, and around her throat a gold crucifix that dangled from a chain. I was so glad that after my shower I had changed into a clean shirt, fresh pair of slacks and loafers before leaving my home. The way in which some women adorn themselves, these items could become war paint and weapons. The fashion in which this woman used them, they all were part of the feast for anyone's hungry eyes that had been fortunate enough to gaze upon her. Chris then gave me another quick peck on the cheek, which elicited more shrieks, giggles and yells from the kids. "Oh, she kissed him! Mummy kissed him! Mummy kissed Steve!" Tonight Chris wasn't the only one blushing at their remarks. "It's just what grown-ups do sometimes when they want to say hello to people they know," I told them. "Mummy doesn't kiss Mr. Louis at the bodega, or our teacher, Mr. Franzen, or anyone else but us." "Well," I continued, "I guess we can count ourselves amongst the fortunate few then." The girl's mother then shared with me, as she had done so the night before at the dinner table, her high-beam, blinding smile of appreciation. Before I had a chance to hand over the bag from the gourmet shop and explain we could either set the crackers and cheese out as appetizers, or I could leave them to enjoy it another time, I removed the corkscrew and bottle of wine. Steve remembered to bring wine. "So we get Coca-Cola again." This elicited a few laughs from the only adults in the room, followed by Chris again requesting we serenade her with our music as she tended to things in the kitchen. While she was in the other room, and before launching into the performance of our first song, the twins and I had another heart-to-heart conversation. "Mummy likes you." "Yeah, she likes you a lot, but said we're not supposed to tell you." "I heard that, you little blabbermouths," came from the kitchen. "Well, I like your mummy a lot too. And you know what else?" Both heads moved in synchrony, signalling a negative response, and once more reminding me of a pair of carrot-top bobbleheads. "It's that I also like you two a lot, and I'm so happy the 4 of us met yesterday." "Yay, he likes us. We like you. See, Mummy, we didn't spoil anything." From the kitchen came the burst of laughter which each time I'd hear could make me fall more deeply in love with this woman who would one day become my future wife. Taking this as our cue, we began to play the I Love You song from the Barney the Dinosaur TV series, but by unspoken mutual agreement we substituted like for the word love, and since it was not a word neither Chris nor I had yet spoken to one another, I certainly didn't want to overplay my hand and screw things up so early in the game. I believe that was one of the wiser choices of words I ever made. I'd worried all the way back to the Shantzes' home how I was going to tell the twins, but it was not the thing I should have been concerned about. From the moment Gus and I walked in, and without a single word exchanged, they knew. When we entered the room looking the way we did and without their mother, they knew. On their faces, as if they'd been inscribed with indelible ink, I could clearly read the saddest set of words in the world that I'd never wanted to see. Our mother is dead. Shock turned to tears, and tears turned to body-racking sobs, and the sobs soon became wails of heartbroken sorrow. Wrapping her arms around Chris's daughters, Lorraine joined them, mourning her own dearly departed friend from next door. Gus and I did our best to console them, but the crying continued until after the sun came up the next morning. I knew it was only a brief respite, because even though their eyes had run out of tears, we all still had many more, though oceans and oceans more, to shed in the coming days and nights. Doing our best to soothe and console our own and each other's family, Gus and I became a part of their embrace, but other than our love, we offered little more than pathetic platitudes and empty words, falling short of their mark. Finally, Gus suggested that he and Lorraine go into the kitchen to make breakfast for everyone, even though they knew no one would even touch the food on the plates that would be put before them, and to allow me have some time alone with Anya and Noika. There was a large sofa in the Shantzes' living room on which I hoped we'd sit with each other when we spoke, but the girls chose to wedge themselves together on the small settee across from an upholstered chair. So I sat in the chair by myself. For a few moments we all stared at one another in silence. Then I began. We all loved your mother, and from their shocked and disgusted reaction I immediately regretted I chose to use the past tense in conjugating the word love. The normally talkative two glanced at one another with eyes narrowed as seemingly discussing the situation with each other in speechless silence for a few seconds. Anya's green eyes burned with an intensity I before never had witnessed, as Noika leaned in towards her sister, as if listening more closely as her eyes too began to blaze with an emotion I'd hoped I'd never see from either of Chris's daughters. They hated me. So, fumbling to recover from my fatal faux pas, I went on. And of course we still do love her. You know, Gus and the other doctors did everything they could, but they just couldn't save her. I know how much pain and sorrow you're both feeling right now, because I feel it too. But the three of us, we're still a family, and as a family I want us all to be there for one another. Since your mother is no longer here, we're going to need each other even more than before. I'm your dad, and for as long as I live, I want you to know I'll be here for you both, no matter what. I love your mum. My voice cracked as I spoke, and I'd trade my own life if it meant she could be with you now, her daughters, whom she loved not only more than herself, and of course even more than me. I wouldn't have wanted her to love you any less, or any other way. Noika, Anya, I love you both the way she did. You're my daughters too. Please never ever think you're not, or forget that. I love her, and you love her, and Gus and Lorraine love her, and so many other people also love her. It's just that sometimes love is not enough, especially when it comes to death. We can talk till our faces turn blue about what we know of life and death, but maybe today we should all talk about what we don't know. So, since I'm the only one that's talking at the moment, I'm going to say what I believe is the most important thing I know about what I don't know. I don't know why your mother, why Chris, had to die last night. I really don't know, and I don't think I'll ever understand why someone so loving, so caring, so giving, so beautiful and wonderful had to leave us. but I'm happy she knew how much we all loved and cared for her in return, because she never failed to tell us how she did and how it made her who she was. I'm sorry, but I don't know what else I can say to you or myself about right now, except I'm your dad and I'm here for you. You're not our dad. You're only our stepdad. So stop pretending you're something you're not. The sting of those words stung me exactly as they were intended to. I had not only lost Chris last night, but I'd lost her daughters too. In less than 24 hours, I'd lost my entire world. But wait a minute, if I was to let go so easily of the two most important extensions of Chris, let go without a fight, then they were correct in saying I'd only been pretending. Maybe you're right, but your mum certainly didn't think so, and neither do I. Then can we talk to you? Not like a parent, but like we're all just people? Of course, and I think if that helps you talk about Chris's death, then that would probably be all for the best at this moment. Why then did you or Mum think that Anya or I couldn't understand Steve? Why the fuck didn't you two just talk about it, even once with us? What about us? Noika and I are fucking family too, and you both iced us out. We hate you. As their last sentence pierced my heart like an arrow, I covered my face with both hands, slumped forward and began rocking to and fro as deep sobs now controlled the movement of my body. The viper that had wrapped around my throat last night in the hospital had returned and must have brought a few of his buddies along for the kill. I felt one invisible snake coil around the fore, sides and back of my head. Another was constricting so tightly around my chest it was now impossible to breathe. Even my arms and legs felt like they'd wound so tight around them the blood had stopped circulating. One serpent sunk its fangs into my left arm, for pain shot throughout the limb, followed by tingling numbness. A tiny one must have slithered into my open mouth while I was talking, and was now thrashing so violently in my guts I knew I was about to be sick. The room spun around, and as I lost consciousness, I heard one of Chris's daughters, I believe it was Anya, call into the kitchen for Dr. Shantz's help. Finally, I passed out. When I came to, I was on the floor, lying on my back. Gus, who had ripped open my shirt, was on top of me, administering CPR. Lorraine, Noika and Anya were all kneeling on the floor beside me. Lorraine at my feet was removing my shoes and socks. Anya, who held my right hand, was rubbing the inside of my wrists at a place where my pulse was pounding. Noika was doing the same on my left, halting the steady pumping activity with his hands that had been placed over my heart. Gus reached into his ever-present doctor's bag, and as he did during the previous night with Chris, he prepared to inject me with something. Next, everything just went black. After my second supper with her family, Chris and I began seeing each other on a regular basis. Mostly our dates and hangs would be in either of our apartments, since Anya and Noika were still only 4 years old. We did try, once or twice, to enjoy meals in a restaurant as a family, but the little ones were bored beyond tears during these occasions. Not only that, when we were out, instead of focusing on each other, Chris and I would spend these dates attending to the needs of the children and keeping them from underfoot and out of the hair of others in these establishments. Since the twins were too young to attend school then, or to be left on their own alone, and neither she nor I had family living in the local vicinity, they were entirely our responsibility, which, all in all, I was pretty much fine with. As I fell further in love with Chris, I also was falling further in love with her little monsters. Her term for them, not mine. They were adorable. Although identical twins, and apparently joined at the hip in everything they did and said, by our third day I no longer had any difficulty in telling them apart. Anya was perhaps a quarter of an inch taller. She was bold, more direct, and the one most likely to initiate any activity the two engaged in. This little girl was also a dancer. Any time there was music playing, Anya just had to stop whatever she was doing to let its rhythm transport her into a world of expression through movement. That, of course, was one of the several complications we had during our attempted experiments with dining in public. She was also the more serious and no time for nonsense of the two. In fact, she was the epitome of an old soul locked in a young body, and of the two possessed a solemn air of gravitas. Noika, on the other hand, was the more easygoing and happy-go-lucky. But even though she wasn't quite as tall, and would normally acquiesce to any of her sister's suggested activities or demands, she wasn't a pushover. If this little carrot top really wanted something, she wouldn't force you to provide it for her. Oh no, she'd convince you that you wanted her to have it. Then she would willingly, benevolently and happily assist you in achieving that endeavour. More times than not, it was Noika who had us wrapped round her little finger, and half the time we were unaware she was even doing it. Early on, I learned that Jan Wojciech had not only been a good man and husband, but that he'd also been a good provider. Like any good husband and father, he'd been covered by a hefty life insurance policy. At the time of his death, he had never missed a payment on that policy, so at least for the next 10 years or so after passing, his family would be well taken care of. He also had a great attorney. Jan's car had been broadsided by another driver who ran a stop sign, but who was also covered by a premium automobile insurance policy that had a sufficient amount of bells and whistles built into its coverage plan. In addition to what Chris and her daughters were receiving from his life insurance, they would also receive an amount almost equal to that as compensatory damage from the other driver's insurance company. During the brief court case, the prosecuting attorney had uncovered some unsavoury details about the driver that his insurance company's legal team had tried to hide. Thus, once Jan's lawyer revealed that revelation, the presiding judge hit both the driver at full and his insurers with some pretty hefty punitive fines. Being left a single mother after the accident, Chris had quit her job to raise the children. As it turns out, Chris did more than just speak, read and write in the Croatian language. She was also fluent in English, French, German, Italian, Romanian, Spanish, Portuguese, and had worked full-time at the United Nations as a translator. Without a second thought, she gave up a career that was on the path for stellar ascension to care for her babies. She could certainly afford to hire sitters, or even a full-time nanny, but was uncomfortable leaving her kids alone with anyone to look after them who was only doing it for the money. The one time we did go out together, while a babysitter with impeccable references watched over them, she was, to put it mildly, miserable. I lost count of the number of times she apologised and excused herself to check on things at home. I got it, so after our waiter had removed our untouched cocktails and appetiser plates, I asked for the cheque, paid it, and hailed a taxi cab to take us home. "Steve, I'm so sorry, but I just couldn't relax and enjoy myself being away from them tonight. I kept thinking of silly things, like if there was some kind of emergency where the sitter had to decide if she'd save herself, or... Chris, don't. I felt the same way, and I'm glad we're just going back home. Anyway, who needs all that fancy-smancy restaurant food when we have you to cook for me and the girls?" And in one of her rare displays of public affection, Chris kissed me harder than she ever had in the past, and mounted me momentarily in the back seat of that cab as the driver watched in his rear-view mirror. Now, while I wanted to ravish her just as much at that moment, we couldn't because of the lack of privacy. And that, you see, was the problem. As of yet, we've never had the time or privacy to fully consummate the physical side of our relationship. How could we, with two preciously precocious toddlers wandering around day and night, making surprise appearances when we least expected them? We would make out and share a few stolen caresses whenever we could, but each time we were interrupted by unexpected visits from the children, requests for drinks of water or escorts to the bathroom, or just the need for attention. I understood. That same night, after the failed restaurant meal and the temptatious taxi trip, while we were making out on her couch and I had my hands inside of Chris's blouse, we heard a tiny voice say, "Mummy, what is Steve doing to you?" "Oh, honey, I think a bug may have bitten me, so Steve's just checking if I'm all right," Chris responded to Noika as she pushed me away and hurriedly rebuttoned her top. "Steve, is Mummy going to be okay? Did you find any bug bites?" "A bump or two, but she'll be fine. I'll take care of her. Now let's get you back to bed so you can giddy up off to dreamland. Come on, I'll give you a horseback ride to your room, then sing you a song that'll put you to sleep." But you don't have your guitar tonight, Noika pointed out as she climbed on my back to hitch a ride to sleepy time. Well, I did bring my voice and a song in my heart, so do you think that'll be enough for this unplanned serenade? Okie dokie, Steve, that'll work. She felt no heavier than my guitar when carried in my soft shell shoulder bag. I really did love these little munchkins, despite the minor inconveniences they imposed upon our sex life. I understood if there was ever a woman worth waiting for, it was Svieta Chris Wojciech, and if necessary, I would wait for her until eternity ended. By the time I had her tucked in, Chris had joined us, and we were both sitting on Noika's bedside. Anya had awoken from the commotion, so I asked them if they were ready for their lullaby. The response was affirmative. Thus I began. La 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 la, I sang in an operatic triadic outline. Wait a minute, is that supposed to be our lullaby? No, I'm just warming up. Here's the lullaby that I wrote for a cat who once adopted me and suffered from insomnia. You had a cat? What was its name? And what's insomnia something? No, she adopted me. Her name was Kunta, and insomnia is when you can't sleep, just like you two little monsters. Noika, we have insomnia. Anya, Steve got adopted by a cat before we got him. Kunta's a nice name. Now, do you want me to sing to you, or do you want to play 20 questions? Sing, sing, sing Kunta's song. So I cleared my throat, sat up straight, and commenced to gently and very slowly sing a cappella The Mouse of Your Dreams. The mouse of your dreams is a very fine mouse, bigger than a breadcrumb, smaller than your house. The mouse of your dreams will lead you to sleep and into tomorrow through dreams that are sweet. Shh. I swear to God, and this is coming from a devout atheist, by the last line, both beautiful green-eyed tiny little girls had closed their eyes to go off on a platonic date with the Sandman. Chris led me from their bedroom by my hand and into her room and whispered, "You're spending the night here tonight." My, that was rather direct. Well, you strike me as the kind of man who wouldn't accept anything else than absolute directness. Touché. Chris then locked the bedroom door and made love to me more sweetly than I'd ever known love to be before. By the end of consummating what we'd both waited for so long, this goddess, the mother of the only 2 children I have ever wanted to love and care for, had not only satisfied my every desire, but had also delighted and surprised me. And although I would have thought it impossible, she made me fall more deeply in love with her and her daughters. Oh my God, I'd just been adopted by the family of my dreams. Even before opening my eyes again, I knew I had to be either dead or in a hospital. From somewhere in the background I could hear the gentle murmur of machines, but other than that it was very quiet. Trying to recall what had happened, I remembered my friend Gus crouching over me while he pounded away at my chest. His wife Lorraine did something down by my feet, while Noika and Anya held my hands as they massaged my wrists. Other than that, I was in the dark in more ways than one. Slowly opening my eyes in the dimly lit room, and even though my vision was somewhat blurred, I then saw what appeared to be electronic medical equipment to my left. As my vision improved slightly, I slowly turned my head to the right. It was throbbing with so much pain I thought it'd split open if I moved too quickly. There, sitting in a chair not too far from my bedside, I could make out the figure of a woman asleep. Next to her was an identical image. I must be seeing double, I thought. Blinking a few times to sharpen the focus of my vision, I saw she had beautiful, long, tightened red hair. Sweet Jesus on a popsicle stick. Chris! 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 Oh my God, Chris! Both of the red-headed figures awoke simultaneously with a gasp and a start. "Daddy! Daddy's awake! Daddy, we're here with you! Don't move too much, Daddy! You'll pull out the IV! And you're connected to a heart monitor, Daddy!" From their distinctive speech pattern, the hair colour, and the fact that there were two of them, I knew that it must be Chris's daughters. Memories of what had happened now flowed and flooded my muddled mind. My wife falling ill, rushing to the hospital, hearing she'd died, scenes from the Shantz's home, our daughters telling me how much they now hated me, the pain as if my heart was breaking in two, falling to the floor unconscious. My spirit sank as I recalled these things, as well as the realisation that my wife was no longer alive. But then, as my girls hurried over to me, it arose anew as I remembered how the twins had just called me their dad, and that they cared enough to be here by my side. "Daddy, how are you feeling, Daddy? Please tell us you're okay. We're so sorry for being such basic bitches. Oh, Daddy, we love you, and we were so wrong." They held my hands as they showered my face with kisses and tears that were falling from their sad green eyes. In response, I squeezed their hands with my own and did my best to return as many kisses as I could to their baby-soft, tear-stained cheeks. Without a sign of slowing down, they continued to rain kisses on my always ready to be kissed by them cheeks as our tears mingled. "Anya, Noika, when I saw you, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, and that you were angels who were going to teach me how to play the harp." They erupted in laughter at my crazy comment. I tried to join in the laughter, but my chest hurt too much to do that right now. "What happened to me?" "Dr. Shantz said you suffered a heart attack, and it almost killed you. Oh, Daddy, we feel so bad. We thought we broke your heart." "You could never do that, my little carrot tops," I lied. For indeed they had done exactly that, with words that had served to tell me I had been unadopted, in at least a metaphorical sense. But I thought better of telling them that. After all, if I were truly willing to give my life for theirs, take a bullet for them, so to speak, I could at least shield them from any more guilt than they already bore. I may not have been a wise man, but even a fool is wise enough to know that when you've just received redemption and resurrection within only heartbeats apart, then you best just close your mouth and count all of your blessings. It has just occurred to me that thus far I've nearly neglected to mention the details regarding the age of myself and my wife. When we first met in 2007, I was 53 and Chris was only 32. Well, that's a 21-year gap between us, but it never bothered Chris. Over the dozen years we were together, she appeared to age little, if any, and the longer we were together, the younger that wonderful woman and her daughters made me feel. I often had wondered if my goddess had discovered the fountain of youth and was surreptitiously slipping a dose of it into our coffee each morning. I wouldn't have considered that kind of mischievous magic beyond the capabilities of my sexy sweetheart. Now, the twins were another matter. When they first found me, they were 4 years old. Over the years, we delightfully watched them age and grow. At the beginning of each of their new years, and by that I of course mean their birthdays, we tried to commemorate each one with a memorable celebration. Whether that was purely for our daughter's fulfilment, or more for our own, is certainly something you're free to debate amongst yourselves, so have at it. Go on now, get it out of your system. Naturally, I wasn't even in the picture when the girls turned 4. That glorious night, the first time Chris and I made love, when she invited me to spend the night, and during post-coital pillow talk, I asked her if she wanted me to leave before the morning in order to avoid confusing Noika and Anya about what was going on. "Steve, if we're going to do this, and we're going to make it work, we shouldn't hide it from anyone. We're either in this relationship or we're not. So if you want to do this with me, and by me, I mean this family, please decide now." "I do. Tonight, tomorrow, and every day thereafter until death us do part." Once more I was rewarded with another of Chris's electrifying kisses, on not only my always ready to be kissed by her cheek, but on other parts of my body as well. But in order to keep this account of the years we spent together as a family, as family friendly as possible, we shan't divulge any other details as to the locations kissed for now. After my lover shared a few more sensuous surprises with me, we fell asleep until morning. When we awoke, Chris asked if I could make coffee while she got the girls up for breakfast. When the three of them entered the kitchen, I was setting the table for our morning meal. "Mummy, look! Steve's here!" "You're here early, Steve." "Guess I just can't get enough of your mum's cooking." The girls and I then helped Chris prepare breakfast amidst non-stop chittering and chattering, along with much laughter and giggles. The love I felt for this family by whom I've been adopted far exceeds what words can express. My heart was so full of happiness on that morning my chest may have popped a shirt button or two. "Mummy, why is Steve here in the kitchen so early?" "I asked Steve if he would sleep here last night and he said he would." Then the inevitable question was asked. "He didn't sleep in our room. So did he sleep in yours?" "Where did he sleep?" Locking her gorgeous green eyes in a gaze with my blue ones, Chris looked at me for help before continuing. "Steve's become our friend, right? I like him. I like him too. He plays songs and says funny things. And I like him too. I like him very much. It was late last night when he was going back home, so I asked him if he wanted to stay here instead, and he said he did, so he slept in my bed along with me." "Did he hog the bed? Steal the blankets? Does Steve snore?" At that last question, asked as usual in unison by the twins, I lowered my head, feigned being asleep, and commenced to loudly snore. This, of course, sent the three women I loved so much into gales of giggles. It was also at this point I felt I should provide some more assistance for my girlfriend. "I like you two little munchkins a lot, and I really like your mum too. Is it okay with you that I stay here when she asks me?" "Sure, Steve. Just don't hog the bed and steal the blankets, or snore too much. Then do we have a deal?" "Deal." "Deal. Let's shake on it." Noika extended one tiny hand that Anya then held, while Chris wrapped hers around her daughters and then I around their three, and we shook on it. Well, now that I've explained how we told the children we were now officially a couple, shall we move on with what I really wanted to tell you about? Our girls' birthdays. For a party celebrating their 5th, Chris baked a cake and I bought a tub of Rocky Road ice cream. Behind their mum's back they asked me to buy them BB guns, which of course my girlfriend had already said no to that request because they'd shoot their eyeballs out. Obviously this family had watched A Christmas Story a time or two. So I bought them a guitar lele, the smallest type of guitar, and began to teach them how to play. The lessons were a family affair, and as they grew I'd upscale the stringed instrument size until they could handle the full body models. Both girls still pick, strum and sing along to them to this very day. On their 6th we had a miniature golf party with a few of their first grade friends. Their request for pizza was of course granted, and we gave Anya a pair of ballet slippers and Noika a Crayola Colour Wonder magic light brush. The 7th we visited a petting zoo upstate and had a picnic and a few gifts, but the big surprise was we announced we were getting married. This news was met with the now typical 3-comment form the growing like weeds carrot tops were now notorious for delivering. "Finally, it's about time you did. What were you waiting for, Steve?" When the 8th rolled round, we threw a party at a bowling alley with corn dogs and chili fries. The gifts were bikes with training wheels. With much knuckle bruising and Chris's help, the cycles were assembled. They rode them at a local park under our watchful eyes. Number 9 was celebrated at home with schoolmates as the guests. The gifts were many, and again their wish for pizza we granted. By the 10th they had a budding interest in fashion, so Chris covered that base, while I was in charge of carrying the bags while she shopped. Once more, and by popular demand, can you guess? Pizza! Coming in hot at number 11, it was clothing again, and they asked for sushi instead of pizza. Except for one party guest's accidental wasabi overdose incident, all went swimmingly. Shoes and hair products were on their gift wish list by the time they hit the 12th. We had moved into a small home so they could each have their own room, yet after a few days they requested we return both beds back into one room because they liked it better that way. To celebrate, they opted to have a few of their select friends over for a party with pizza delivery. We surprised them with iPods, which they used from that day forth to shut us out of their adolescent world by plugging the buds in their ears and cranking up the volume. Now that they were into their teens, we could see that their desire to spend birthdays with us was clearly diminishing. Prior to the start of their first co-ed event, they asked us if we could just stay in our bedroom until it was over, and were told that from here on we should just give them money and they'd take care of their own gifts. That year was followed by the 14th and the 15th, where their demand and requests now pretty much remained the same, and their parties progressively grew louder. When we offered to throw a Sweet 16 bash, our suggestion was greeted with eye rolls and sarcasm. At 16, the last year that Chris would still be with us, we gave them some cash as per their request. They asked if we could give them a few more dollars and then went out with their friends. I miss my wife. After she died, I wasn't much good for anything for a while, so birthday parties were now, I'm sorry to say, officially a thing of the past. By the time I was released from the hospital, Chris's daughters had officially become my self-appointed caregivers. They abandoned pretty much all after-school social activities during their last 2 years of high school in order to rush home and see to my recovery. And it was a lengthy recovery at that. I was a total mess, not only physically but mentally as well. I was despondent and depressed by the loss of my wife, my best friend, my lover and my soulmate. And with each day that would pass, I'd lose more and more of my desire to go on living. Of course, the doctors had at first prescribed medicine for the physical ailments, which Anya and Noika made sure I took on a daily basis. But then the twins noticed I was sleeping more frequently, and for longer periods. They asked our next-door neighbour, Dr. Shantz, if he could drive them over to speak with my cardiologist, and to do so without letting me know. Gus, being a loyal friend of the family, not only readily agreed to their request, but he also accompanied them to the meeting to confer with the other physician about what regimen of treatment was the optimal one for my condition. On the drive home, the three of them made a pit stop at a local pharmacy to fill my newest and latest prescriptions. While this outpouring of love was admirable, it made me worry that for my 2 girls it was guilt-driven. I knew Chris's daughters blamed themselves for causing my heart attack, but that wasn't the case. It was how I lost my wife that broke my heart. And I did try to explain that to them, but to no avail. As a result, I not only felt terrible that this pair of vibrant and attractive young ladies were now missing out on some of the best years of their teenage lives, but that I was responsible for saddling them with this unfair burden of blame. Thus, in spite of everyone's best efforts, I continued to sink lower and lower into the abyss of self-pity and heartache. After that episode of cardiac arrest, I informed my business partner that I was retiring and handed over the entire operation to him to continue running as he saw fit. Since being adopted by them, this family was always my number one priority. Chris frequently joked that while she may have been my girlfriend at first and then my wife later, that my career was always my mistress and her chief rival. She was then quick to add that it better be the only rivals she and the family ever had to contend with, or else, one night while I slept, she'd cut off my... well, you all know where that was going. So, let's just leave it at that and say she threatened to bob at me. To alleviate my spouse's concerns, I'd tell her that since I already had 3 wonderful women in my world, who were more beautiful than life itself, why would I muck up the best affair any hot-blooded man could have been blessed to be involved with, and risk losing it by involving a 4th? And to that she'd erupt in peals of her girlish laughter, then lean in to kiss my always ready to be kissed by her cheek. But Now I had all the time in the world on my hands and nothing left to do with it. Chris, how I miss you, my love. If I'm to be perfectly honest, in my duty as a reliable raconteur of this tale, then I must admit I was completely and thoroughly done with time. Since Noika and Anya were still in class that day, and while they were still away, why not just take every single pill I had around this place and drift into that big sleep? Perhaps if there was a thereafter, then I'd awaken to be with Chris again, in that place wherever we all go when we die. At a bit past 1 p.m, I dragged myself up from the bed to begin my pill-gathering suicide mission. It would be my final, fatal last plan. Stuffing every medicine bottle I could find into my pyjama pockets, I then returned to our bedroom. And yes, I still did think of it as our bedroom. To do the deadly deed. It was then that Chris's ghost made its appearance for the very first time. Her apparition was sitting on the side of the bed as if she'd been waiting just for me to make my return. "So, Steve, how are our daughters doing?" Startled by her presence, it took me a tick or two before I replied, "Sassy, sarcastic, full of piss and vinegar, and just as lovely as their ever so magnificent mother, my dear." That laughter, which I believed I'd never hear in this world again, filled our bedroom anew as she rose from our bed and then leaned in toward me to plant one of her wonderful kisses on that always ready to be kissed by her cheek. But before she could, her spirit faded prior to her kiss having found its mark. And that, my friends, was the very first time, but far from the last, that I was paid a brief visit by my deceased darling's ghost. As if in a trance, I returned the pill bottles to where I'd found them. Next I went into the kitchen, opened the freezer, at the top section of our refrigerator to find an unopened tub of Rocky Road ice cream, and removed it. Searching a kitchen drawer for a large spoon, I then took these 2 items back to the bedroom with me to binge on the sugary frozen confection and to ponder the events that had just occurred. That first meeting with Chris's ghost really shook me up. I normally don't believe in the supernatural, but she looked and sounded so real. Asking about our daughters would have naturally been the first thing she'd have done if she could come back, and dare I say this, back from the dead. And oh my God, that laughter! It was unmistakably Chris. Was I going mad? Or could it have been a reaction to the antidepressants I'd begun taking a few months ago? Maybe it was that I was now consuming a lot of alcohol as a form of self-medication, something I'd been warned not to mix with these kinds of drugs during the period they'd been prescribed. Ah, the alcohol. Shortly after being sent home from the hospital, and as soon as I could get out of bed and walk a short distance on my own, I'd been sneaking drinks on the sly. I knew the booze couldn't cure any of my ills, yet it numbed me, and the number I became, the less I felt the agonising anguish of having lost my beloved, beautiful wife. In my opinion, it was doing a better job than the Lexapro, the Wellbutrin, and the Remeron or Spravato. In fact, all the prescriptions appeared to achieve were to make my mouth dry, have nausea, harder to think clearly, clumsier, and more exhausted than I already felt. Thus, without consulting anyone, I stopped taking the antidepressants. I'd also sworn to stop drinking, but after the unbearable ache of my loneliness returned, and in order to quell that feeling, I resumed my secretive habits. But I was knocking back increasing amounts of alcohol. Regardless of what I took or didn't take, Chris's ghost had been returning almost on a daily basis, at least once a day. And you know what? Those visits were the highlight of my now meaningless days and nights, so I look forward to them with eager anticipation, however brief they were. Over the next year, I'd not only developed a nasty drinking problem, but I'd also gained a considerable amount of weight as a result of constant overeating and no exercise. Especially all that Rocky Road ice cream I was scarfing down on a much too regular basis. I'd become a drunken, bloated blimp who stood, at least when I could stand without falling, which had become increasingly challenging, at 6'1" and weighed in at a way over 220 pounds. To put it kindly, a courtesy which I no longer felt was deserved, I was currently an absolute mess. What made it worse was I suspected that Anya and Noika knew exactly what was going on. The way they both looked at me with horror and pain in their expressions was excruciating. So I drank and ate even more junk food to numb that pain too. One day I discovered my supply of ice cream and a secret stash of hooch was gone. I knew that I hadn't consumed those items entirely, so the twins must have gotten rid of what remained. That sent me into a blind rage. How dare they? I'm their father, damn it. Well, maybe not their biological father, but I'm their dad. Maybe I hadn't been acting like that recently, but I did deserve to be regarded and respected as any other person would. Then I heard that sound of the penny dropping as the reality slowly sank in. That was something I'd lost the right to expect from anyone, because I'd become a drunken, fat, worthless and stupid, stinking piece of strange. So what did I do to turn things around and get back on track? Absolutely freaking nothing. Chris's ghost was the only one who hadn't seemed to notice these negative and dangerous changes in me. She still loved me and laughed at all my jokes. My wife still found me interesting and witty. Was my lover's spectre the only soul still okay with what I'd become since her death? If it didn't bother her, then why would I care if it bothered anyone else? As long as she still loved me, then why the hell would I even consider caring what anyone else thought? Chris was all that mattered to me. Who cares if I drank like a fish, and that all I ever wanted to eat these days were pizzas and cheeseburgers and french fries and greasy onion rings and potato chips and the super extra hot buttered popcorn and Cheetos and cookies and cakes and candy and a tub after tub after tub after tub of Rocky Road ice cream. Other than her, I didn't give a fickle flying fig about anything, any of them thought. Then I heard the sound of that second penny dropping, when a realisation hit me harder than a rabbit punch to the head. Person. It was only a ghost, if there really were such a thing as ghosts, who popped in uninvited whenever it fancied. It wasn't a person I'd spoken with during these occasions. Occasions that for some reason now hadn't been occurring as often. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my frigging God. What was happening to me? So, you know what I did next? I found my wallet, grabbed a credit card and picked up the phone. In the following sequence, these are the places I called. First the liquor store and ordered a fresh supply of booze. Next was a nearby food store that made deliveries and requested they send over an extra large tub of Rocky Road ice cream, a box of Orville Redenbacher Ultimate Butter popcorn, along with a bottle of popping and topping oil, a supersized extra large bag of Lay's potato chips, and a family-sized bag of Cheetos. Then I called a local pizzeria to have them deliver an extra large pizza topped with double cheese, pepperoni and sausage. I'd show them, damn it. I'd really show them all that I didn't give a smelly pile of shranjay what any of them thought about me any longer. Who were they to have done what they did to me? Everything that I had ordered by phone had been delivered shortly after 2 p.m. For the next several hours I feasted on junk food, washing it down with gulps of vodka straight from the bottle. I was feeling great. I was feeling stuffed. I was feeling drunk. Uh-oh, I was feeling sick. It was almost time for the twins to arrive home from school, and I wanted to hide the evidence in order to keep these secrets to myself. As the uneasy sense of nausea surged, I decided to hit the bathroom first, just in case I really was going to vomit. But when I stood up from where I'd been sitting, the room was spinning. That familiar feeling returned again of all those snakes going in for the kill. The difficulty breathing, the tingling in my left arm, followed by extreme pain and then complete numbness as if it had been shot full of Novocaine, until finally the knowledge I was about to black out, just as I had when I had my heart attack more than a year ago. As the floor rushed toward me, and right before I face planted on the carpeting that Chris had painstakingly picked out around 3 years before her untimely death, I only had one thought in mind. This one's the big one, baby, and Svieta Chris Wojciech, here I come. Oops. I'd now managed to induce what would be my second heart attack in less than 2 years. Whoomp. There it is. 2 days later, when finally awakening after another heart attack, there appeared to be several differences this time around. 1. I knew for sure I wasn't dead. Nearby, I detected the soft and steady murmur of medical equipment as consciousness returned. 2. Chris's daughters weren't at my bedside as they were after the original incident. From the electric clock on the wall, painted some shade of soothing green, I saw the time was almost 6:30 p.m. It was early evening. They couldn't have been still stuck in a classroom at school. Except for the nurse and doctor who had now entered the room, I was totally alone. When they did arrive, shortly before 5 p.m. the next day, the two of them entered the room with serious and solemn expressions plastered on their tired and hurt-framed faces. Maybe it was whatever drugs the medical staff had administered while I was unconscious, or perhaps it was simply my imagination, but Noika and Anya, who were approaching their 18th birthdays, both appeared to be much older than the years they'd lived. Oh, sweet Lord, had I done this to my daughters? Had I... Wait a minute, 18th birthday? It struck me like a million bolts of lightning that while wallowing in my own self-pity and misery for more than a year, I'd completely overlooked, forgotten and neglected to even acknowledge their having turned 17. I hadn't even remembered to say happy birthday, much less than buy them gifts or commemorate the occasion with a celebration. That's how self-involved I'd become since my dear wife's death. How utterly deaf, dumb, blind, inconsiderate and oblivious I'd become when it came to anyone else's grief but my own. And those selfless teens who'd hit the pause button on their own social lives at a time when budding youngsters were supposed to make the transition from childhood and blossom into young adults, I'd thoughtlessly and selfishly stolen from them. Nary a single word of protest or disappointment about all they were so obviously missing out on had they uttered, all the while they were looking after me. They simply swallowed their pain, hid their tears, and stoically carried on caring for their only remaining parent, always and without fail placing my welfare above their own. About 5 minutes after my latest heart attack, they'd come through the door of our home to find me face down on the floor. While Anya called 911, Noika ran next door to see if Dr. Shantz was at home. Luckily he was. Gus and Lorraine returned with Chris's daughter to our house, and working together the four of them saved my life a second time. As before, Gus followed close behind the ambulance along with his wife and the girls. During the time it took Gus to check me into the hospital, then to consult with the attending physician, Lorraine and the girls sat fidgeting and nervous in the waiting room. Many hours later they were informed my condition had stabilised, but I would be unconscious for quite some time and they should just go home. Prior to leaving, Gus informed the head nurse that her job would be on the line if someone from the staff didn't call us as soon as I regained consciousness, and they did. So, 3 days after this current cardio incident, Gus, Anya and Noika drove back to the medical centre, albeit at a lower velocity than when following an ambulance. Minutes after my gloomy-looking girls had shown up, Gus entered the room with his ubiquitous doctor's bag. Using the stethoscope hanging around his neck to check my heart and pulse, and with an edge of tense, stone-cold professionalism in his voice, he asked questions pertaining to my condition. Once the state of my health was assessed, he joined my so far silent girls, and the three sat facing me in my hospital bed. Dr. Shantz was the first to speak. "Steve, you can't go on like this. You won't survive if you keep abusing your body and have another heart attack." For the first time since the first few days after her death, I saw Chris's daughters cry. Anya had now embraced Noika, while the two trembled and sobbed. "You've pushed it and us as far as you and we can go. Just stop it. You're not just killing yourself, you're killing all of us. We understand what you've been through, but you've been dragging us through it too. It hasn't been easy for any of us to accept Chris's death, but if you don't find a way to move on, then it won't be long till you die too. Well, perhaps that's what you want. Just think of what that's doing to your daughters, if not to what it's doing to all of us. You've had us worried sick for a very long time. Just stop, God damn it. You've got to stop it immediately. The Shantzes were devout Catholics, so to hear him take the Lord's name in vain was unusual, to say the least. Lorraine and I spoke with the girls, and we all agree it would be better if they stayed with us for now. I'll arrange for a live-in nurse to care for you when you're released, so there will be someone to see after you while they're at our house. But listen, Steve, and I'm only going to tell you this once, that after you're released, you have to let us check you into rehab and stay there until they decide you're well enough to go home. If not, we'll file for permanent custody of Noika and Anya, and the girls have already agreed to this, and you'll lose them forever. So if you really want to keep on killing yourself, we're serving notice. We're not going to stand in your way any longer. You're just not going to keep doing it in front of us anymore. Just listen to what he's saying. Just fucking listen, Dad. Please, just start listening to us. Do you want us to drop out of school and not go to college so we can take care of you? Because if that's the only way to keep you alive, we'll fucking do it. But is that what you really want us to do? Rehab? I really don't think I need to go into rehab. And I know you're right. I have to start making some changes in my life, but I can do it on my own. Well, if that's the way you feel, Gus said as he and my daughter stood up to leave, then there's nothing left to discuss and we'll be on our way. If you do change your mind, then call. If not, you're on your own, Steve. And without saying another word, shedding another tear, or even leaving a single kiss on my always ready to be kissed by them cheeks, they exited the room and left me alone to my own devices. Closing my eyes, I questioned what had just gone down. Had I just lost my daughters, in addition to losing two of the few friends I still had in this world? Rehab. I don't need to go into rehab to get better. I could take care of myself without that. Hell, I could even... Shranjay, Steve! Get it together, if not for your sake, if not for mine, then for theirs. Stop acting like a petulant child. I know you love them as much as you loved me, so if you now don't do what you know is in your heart, the heart that you once claimed to have given to us, then you'll not only lose me forever, but you'll lose Anya and Noika too. I know who you truly are, and it's not this self-absorbed monster in mourning you've become since I died. Chris's ghost had not visited me for some time, and I missed my wife. Opening my eyes, I saw she was now standing at the foot of my bed, looking angrier than I could remember having seen her during the years we were together and alive. She'd gotten mad at me in the past, but I've never seen her in this way. Her beautiful face was now ugly and livid with rage, and the acrimony was focused solely on me. Once more the woman I loved made my heart skip another beat, but just not in the same way it had the first time we met on the stairs of our old apartment, or the many times during the years we'd been together. Sweetheart, I don't think... I'm dead, Steve, so just let go of me, because by your own acts of selfishness you're dying too. But our daughters are alive, so live so they can get on with their lives. Please, Steve, please. If you really ever wanted to do anything to show me just how much you love me, then let go of our past and let them live. You're making me realise what a fool I married when I married you. Don't you even see what you're doing? You're not only ruining your life, but you're ruining our daughters too. Do you really want our girls to drop out of high school and not go to college, to take care of you? Is that what you want to do after all these years we've raised and loved them as much as we loved each other? Stop it, stop it, stop it, Steve. Just fucking stop it now. Chris, I told you, I don't need to go into rehab. And before I'd finished that ill-conceived sentence, I heard the sound of the final penny drop, as the understanding ultimately struck home, and what those words actually meant. My wife had married a fool, and that fool was me. Okay, Steve, you lost me once, you're losing our daughters, and now you're about to lose me again. Because this time when I leave, and unless you do what they say and let them check you into rehab, this time I swear it'll be for eternity. Please, 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 please do this for all of us. Please do this for our family. Steve. Before Chris could finish what she was saying, and prior to leaning in to try to kiss me on my always ready to be kissed by her cheek, the way that she'd done during all those past brief visits, her apparition had disappeared from my room in a blinding flash of light. Oh my God, had it really come to this again? Could this really be the end? Word on the street is you have to hit rock bottom before coming back up to the top. But what happens when you hit bottom, crash through its surface, and then keep on falling? That's a rhetorical question, so don't waste any of your time answering it. Maybe I was a fool, but this fool just had a revelation. If I dug myself into this hole, then I could dig myself out, especially with a little help from my friends and family. Am I right? Those very ones who remained partitioned on the far side of my self-constructed wall of stubbornness behind which I'd been sequestered for far too long. I'd fallen into a black hole. It was as if I'd been marooned at its dark centre, trapped inside a rocket ship of remorse, somewhere within a space-time region, like a bug eternally frozen in the hardening ember of its event horizon, unable to move backward or forward from the boundary of no escape of my own making. Yet a handful of scientists studying quantum field theory proposed a hypothesis. They claimed perhaps there was a solution. If one could make it from the point of entry side into the hole, then somehow travel through it to reach the opposite side, one could possibly emerge to escape. It was only a hypothesis, and a real long shot, but now it was all I had left. This was rock bottom, and unless I sunk into death, there was no lower I could go. Ergo, the only direction remaining for me to travel was to go up, and then hopefully break out of my black hole. For the sake of Chris and her daughters, for my friends, and of course for myself, I had to get through this, and I believe I knew just where to begin. I'd speak to my attending physician. When the doctor assigned to my case came by to check in on me that morning, the first thing I asked is when I'd be released from the hospital. Studying the medical chart hanging at the foot of my bed for a few moments, he finally replied, "Barring any unseen complications or setbacks, I believe it would be safe to say by next Wednesday." This was perfect, right on the twins' birthday. A few minutes later, I asked the nurse arriving with my morning medication if she'd mind bringing me my wallet from the admissions desk where it was stored for safekeeping during my stay. After the fiasco that had ensued the night my wife died, I made sure to carry a list containing several emergency phone numbers. From my bed, I dialed the outside line code that was listed on a white sticker adhered to the hospital telephone, then entered Gus's home number. Either the Shantzes were not taking my calls, or else neither of them was at home, because after a few rings my call went straight to voicemail. So I left the following message after the sound of the beep. "Gus, Lorraine, it's Steve. First off, I apologise for everything I've been putting you all through. I don't know how I'll ever do it, but somehow, some way, I will make it up to you both. I promise. Next, you're absolutely right. I can't do this alone, and I need help. I spoke to hospital staff today, and they think I'll be back home by next Wednesday. If you're still willing to assist, and I wouldn't blame you if you're not, could you still help with rehab? Next Wednesday's Anya and Noika's birthday, so I'd like to spend a few hours alone with them before I get checked in. But, as I'm sure you'll agree, I should probably get settled in there the same day I get out of here. Please give my love to my girls and Lorraine, and when possible, please call me back. Once I hear from you, I'll call the girls to see if they'll let me take them out for a birthday lunch before going away. Thank you, Gus. I'm sorry I haven't been a better friend for such a long time, but I promise you, with help, I'll beat this." He returned my call before the day's end. Gus told me he was happy to hear my message, and he'd spoken with the hospital staff, who confirmed the green light was still a go for Wednesday. He, Lorraine and Chris's daughters would pick me up that morning, and the recovery centre could check me in early that same evening. Prior to hanging up, my friend said there were 2 people who wanted to speak with me. Then my girls got on the line. "I love you too, and I'm sorry for everything I've put you through since your mother died. It hasn't been easy for anyone, and that's no excuse for my behaviour. I'm sure Dr. Shantz told you I'm being released next Wednesday, and he's made arrangements at the rehab facility for my treatment. I'll enter it that evening, but I wanted to know something first. Since it's your birthday on that day, would you let me take you both out for lunch before checking into the centre, so we can celebrate your first year of adulthood? Please, please let me do this. Please pick any restaurant you'd like. Knowing you've come to your senses about this is the best birthday gift you could give us, Dad. Dr. and Mrs. Shantz said they'd drive us to pick you up, and we know the perfect place for lunch. That's wonderful. Why don't I make reservations at where we're going, and if you like, see if the Shantzes want to join us? Dad, we want it to be just us there because we really need to talk. But come on, we're old enough to handle making reservations. As that day turned out, I not only had begun to make amends with some of the most important people who were still in my life, but I'd also taken the first step in the long recovery process that awaited me. It would be a step that would not only change my own life, but the lives of those who loved me the most. Gus, being Gus, had called ahead of my release to get a jump on all the paperwork, and thus be ready to roll as soon as they arrived to pick me up that morning. As we departed New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital, Lorraine said that she and the girls had already packed up a few of my things for the stay at that upstate rehabilitation centre. That was good, since the lunch reservations Chris's daughters had booked for the three of us were at a restaurant in the city, and we'd certainly be pressed for time if I had to return back home to pack. My oh my, handling the reservations the way your mother would. You two are adults now. Where is it we'll be celebrating your birthday? It's some place that you and Mum had been to, but it's a surprise. The table was booked for noon. Since we had a bit of time still, we navigated traffic slowly in the direction of where the eatery was situated in Greenwich Village. Somehow along the way we ended up where New York University was located and took a leisurely drive around its various campuses. I was amazed by the number of NYU buildings Noika and Anya knew by name as they pointed them out to me. After about 20 minutes of educational institution sightseeing, our neighbours told me they planned to do a bit of shopping while we ate, but would then pick us up again for the drive upstate. As the car slowed and we pulled up to the curb, my heart skipped a beat or two, as it had done various times before for an assortment of reasons over the years. When I saw where we were, it was the place where Chris and I had that failed evening away from the twins when they were still preschoolers. The same night I'd been officially adopted by the entire Wojciech family. The original restaurant had long since closed its door, but as dining establishments are prone to do in the Big Apple, another one had opened in its place. Tears filled my eyes as we were dropped off outside its doors. It was now an upscale, casual kind of place, and we were seated and provided with menus almost immediately by a hostess so lovely she could have been a Broadway starlet, and who knows, perhaps she was, and simply in between productions at the time. It was New York City after all. An equally beautiful waitress came by the table asking if we'd like a drink before our meal. "I'll have a Coke, please, and may I have one too?" But before I could order, they told our server in unison, "Our Dad's having one too." I knew better than to protest. Nodding my head, I acquiesced in agreement. We then placed orders for our food. Both girls wanted Cobb salads. When the attractive server looked over at me, I said I'd like a cheeseburger, cooked rare, with American cheese and fries. The poor woman hadn't taken 2 steps away from our table to let the kitchen know what we wanted when the twins stopped her dead in her tracks. "Please scratch what he just ordered. Bulletin in from Central Headquarters. He's having what we're having. And if you give him anything with alcohol, my sister will claw your eyes out. You got that?" Anya, who was studying her fingernails, looks up and makes a weak swiping gesture, using the fiery red, polished, carefully manicured, long and tapered talons of her left hand in the direction of our server. Parting her lips to bare her gums, she hisses at the woman like an annoyed cat. The waitress backed away from our table in a combination of brief confusion and mild amusement. Dad, this is serious. We're going to beat this thing together because you know it's what Mum would have wanted. And if that's what we're going to do, we have to start here because you can't afford to put this off any longer. Those words were my kryptonite. Not that they harmed me, but I had no defence to argue against something which I knew was so straightforward and true. I was going to beat this. This invincible support team comprised of what remained of my family and friends refused to let me fail, so I in turn could not fail them. And maybe you haven't figured this out yet, and why it's so important. Guess we'll just have to spell it out for you. We love you, Dad, and we want to make sure you're around long enough to one day walk both of us down the aisle if we ever get married, okay? Feeling like the luckiest dad alive, but wanting to change the subject before I broke down and burst out bawling my eyes out, I asked, "Now what was it you said you wanted to talk about tonight?" Looking at one another like cats that swallowed canaries, they both lost the grim and solemn expressions they'd recently worn on their faces since my second heart attack. Chris's daughters then shot a pair of mega million-watt, ever-so-sunshiny, ear-to-ear smiles my way. "You're not going to believe this, but we've both been accepted at NYU and classes begin next month. Recovery was a serious business. What follows was our weekday schedule. 6 a.m, wake up, hit the loo, put on workout clothes, then report to the exercise room for either 30 minutes of calisthenics or yoga stretching. 6:45, shave, shower, shampoo, dress in casual attire. 7 a.m, check in and roll call at the General Assembly Hall. 7:15, report to the dining hall for breakfast with a choice of mixed fruit cup, grapefruit, cantaloupe, honeydew melon or granola without sugar and with skimmed milk. 8, physical exam and urine sample. 8:30, report to the exercise room again for meditation or to the chapel for prayer. 9, group therapy. 10:30, peer-to-peer sessions. 12 p.m, report to the dining hall for lunch with a choice of salads, grilled chicken, beef or fish, assorted vegetables and a dessert of fresh fruit and or yoghurt. 1, individual therapy. 2, freedom with limits to take walks, bike within the facility grounds, play sports or games, make journal entries, nap, and twice a week have a family visit in the visiting area or make monitored calls on the facility's public phones. 4, daily 12-step AA and or NA meetings. 5:30, report to the exercise room again for meditation or to the chapel for prayer. 6, report to the dining hall for dinner with a choice of soup, salads, grilled chicken, beef or fish, assorted vegetables and a dessert of fresh fruit and or yoghurt. 7:30, watch TV or films in the rec room, performances in the music room, peer-to-peer sessions, reading or make journal entries in the General Assembly Hall. 9:30, prepare for bed. 10, lights out. Weekend schedule was similar, but with the following difference: planned group outings at various times on various weekend days. I was making slow, painful progress, but it was progressing. The individual and group therapy, as well as the peer-to-peer sessions, were the best tools for unpacking much of the conscious and unconscious emotional baggage I'd carried since Chris's death. Little by little my feelings were acknowledged, confronted and handled in a way that provided positive and constructive changes in both attitude and acceptance. One counsellor in particular, Dr. Rose Izeros, was especially helpful. During one of our therapy sessions, she shared an extremely insightful suggestion, mentioning how often the changes in my current dietary and drinking habits had left me feeling empty and unfulfilled and was a cause for concern. She requested additional details. "I'm worried about relapsing into making unhealthy choices in my life again, especially after getting out of here." "Tell me more." "Well, there are both the cravings and the dreams." "Do you believe they could be connected to one another?" "What, the cravings and the dreams?" "Exactly. What are those dreams about?" Mostly I begin drinking, overeating and screwing up my life again. And can you recall when you've had one of those dreams, if you'd had a notably bad bout of struggling with your cravings right before sleep? Taking a moment to remember, it dawned on me how true that was. When you have these dreams or cravings, how does that make you feel? Weak? Less than? Frustrated? Angry? Powerless? You do have power, and you exercise it every minute you're here. Part of this power you possess is the ability to fight urges of this kind. From what I've observed since we've been working together, is that power has not decreased. In fact, it's increased. That's important. You also have the capacity to substitute those negative feelings with positive ones, to regain control over the way you feel. Substitute them how? Over the time since you've been here, haven't you experienced any feelings of happiness about changing the things you disliked in your life? Any feeling of satisfaction about taking responsibility and control over your actions now? Even an occasional sense of euphoria, because after being beat and undone by many of the choices and decisions made in the past, you're now beating back those urges to make those wrong choices and bad decisions again. You've made your mind up to replace them with good and healthy ones. Isn't that a victory that should make you feel a little bit euphoric? Think about this. Yeah, sometimes I do feel like that now, but I still don't quite understand how I best use those sensations and feelings in dealing with the cravings or dreams I'm experiencing. How do I use them as a replacement or a substitute? The next time you're thinking about having an alcoholic beverage or eating when you're not truly hungry, why not concentrate on the way not giving in to those cravings makes you feel instead? Then choose any of the 4 feelings we discussed, such as euphoria, satisfaction, control, or responsibility, and then concentrate on it to substitute one of those positive feelings for any of the negative feelings you have. Use one, use all, but use them. My personal favourite is euphoria. I find that one the strongest of the 4. Whenever I feel the need to call in my inner emotional support team to deal with something I feel may get the better of me, I do this little self-help exercise I'm about to share with you. First, I identify what's attempting to wrest control from me over my actions. Second, I recollect something I did in the past which made me feel euphoric, and what that experience felt like. Third, as I take a deep breath, I envision the air I filled my lungs with contains whatever is causing those negative feelings and hold it in for as long as I can. Fourth, when I finally exhale, I imagine I'm expelling all that negativity from my mind and body into the air and out of me. Then, when I inhale again, I believe I'm breathing in a euphoric memory. If after breathing in, then out, then in again has not yet provided the desired result you're after, I suggest doing as I do. Just keep breathing until it does. Does that work for you? There's a bear shit in the forest. I began trying what Dr. Azeros suggested, yet without much improvement in the beginning. But she had included another nugget of wisdom before that session had concluded, and which I discovered was equally as valuable. This was not a cure, it was an exercise. As with any exercise, it was the repetition of an action that built the strength one strives to obtain. It was not a one-time magic bullet or panacea. So I used the other gem of wisdom shared during that therapy session, and I kept on breathing. Little by little, inch by inch, one step after the other, one breath after another, I began to accomplish that which I sought in making healthier and better choices in my life and achieving sobriety. Using Dr. Azeros' technique on a daily basis, I gradually replaced impulsive behaviour patterns by substituting positive euphoric sensations I'd attained after winning each small battle against my addictions. I took this recovery process as seriously as my last heart attack. It was a struggle, it was far from pleasant, but failure was not an option. I would win. A little over 6 weeks after being admitted, Dr. Azeros and I both agreed it was well time for me to return home to my daughters. With repeated practice, I found Dr. Azeros' visualization breathing exercise progressively beneficial in my recovery. Substituting the remembered sense of euphoria, derived from a positive experience when I had successfully confronted past problems, for the empty and unfulfilled feelings I felt when revisited by urges and craving for junk food and alcohol began to work wonders for me, especially when using this technique before going to sleep. At first, I still was bothered by those worrisome nightmares. When one of those cravings was present, I'd recall the sensation of not succumbing to temptation. The dreams never ceased altogether, but they had less of a negative impact on my sense of well-being. The twins had asked if there were any pantry items I wanted them to pick up prior to my return home. During my time in rehab, I developed a new habit. Instead of drinking soda pop, my drink of choice became seltzer mixed with unsweetened cranberry juice and a wedge of lemon or lime. Every little bit helped, right? And my girls, being my girls, promised my only wish would be their command. The kindly Shances once again provided the car service for my return. Anya and Noika, of course, came along for the ride, and the conversation along the way home was relaxed and congenial. The girls were nearing the end of their first university semester and already planning their courses for the next. They told me that they planned to ace their exams and keep up their grades to the anticipated current level of this period. Here I'll attempt to paraphrase their words in the way in which they were spoken. Dad, we're settling for nothing less than the Dean's List. It was good to go home again with my 2 carrot tops. I cherished my return as much as my sobriety. While Chris's daughters were in class, the Shances would periodically stop by to check in on me, partly to see to my overall health and partly to ensure I hadn't fallen off the wagon. I hadn't, and in fact I'd begun attending nearby AA meetings every day. Besides, I had more important things to do than drink. Chris's ghost had not returned. Because part of my recent treatment had encouraged keeping a journal and making entries about feelings and memories, and since much of what I wrote in it was about my family, I'd attempt to fulfill a lifelong dream. I'd write a book. Serious writing was one of those things I've always wanted to do but never did, so why not start now? It was a no-brainer. It was not only good therapy, but it would tick off an item on the old bucket list. To set words to paper, well, actually on a laptop hard drive, to share with the world what made me happiest in my life. My book would be all about my wonderful years with Chris and her daughters. Once upon a time, I'd snuck drinks and junk food. Now I was sneaking my thoughts about my family into a computer. Why was I being a sneak? Because until I knew for sure I'd see this project through to the end, no one saw a word I wrote. But after several weeks of writing, I was as dedicated as much to this book as I was to be sober and my AA meets. Charles Bukowski, one of my favourite Beat Generation authors, once was quoted saying something like, "To be a writer, just write. Because every time you're not writing, you're not a writer." Okay, simple enough. Well then, let me share a little secret. The writing part was easy. It was the rewriting, editing, re-editing, then re-editing and proofreading over and over again that separates the men from the boys in literature. But I stuck with it. A minute here and a minute there added up to hours and days over time. There were now 4 chapters done to my satisfaction. The first episode was titled Keep Doing You. This was followed by Chris's Daughters, Prognosis and Supper with the Wojciechs. I'd even begun a new one called Waiting Room Blues. The next night, during a dinner of grilled salmon, wild rice, spinach, salad with light balsamic vinaigrette, while the girls sipped their Coca-Colas and I had my cranberry seltzer with a floater, my word for the citrus fruit wedge, the twins asked what I'd been up to that day. "I've been working on my book." "You're writing a book? What's it about, Dad?" "It's about our family and the times we've had together." "So when can we read it?" "I've only 4 chapters done so far and don't know if any of it's any good. My writing, that is, not the memories. Well, there are some bad memories too, but I now understand when I look back, and that with the right perspective, even in the latter there is a way to see some good." Would you like to read what I have so far? Shranjay, yeah, Dad. Can we see them now? Thus, after enjoying the delicious dinner my daughters had prepared, and before I'd washed the dishes, I took the laptop from my bedroom, opened a folder labelled Chris and her daughters, and gave it to them to read. As they took the mobile device into our living room, I told them, and you're under no obligation to say it's good or anything at all for that matter. I'm writing it for me, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it, okay? But hey, if you wanted to start a fan club for me, that's fine. You could even be the co-presidents of it if you like. To this, the laughter that was so like their mothers filled our home. We initiated that Dad fan club years and years ago. As I did the dishes, I heard from the other room some laughter first, next what sounded like a sob or two, and then the two talking. Oh my God, we really like this, and you have to let us read more, Dad. When content with each new edition, I shared it with the two children, of whom I may never have been their father, but unquestionably I'd always be their dad. The years passed and I kept writing. By the time Noika and Anya were about to receive their undergraduate degrees, the book had not only been completed, but through the good graces and an introduction courtesy of one of their professors, I'd met a publisher who published it. Both were already planning to attend graduate school. Before graduation day arrived, my girls arranged another introduction on my behalf. One evening, after classes, they brought home two young gentlemen who bore a rather striking resemblance to one another. Dad, this is Antonio Silva, and this is Carlos Silva, and they're our boyfriends. Each guy shook my hand, reintroduced themselves, and was extremely polite and respectful. Sir, my name's Antonio, and mine's Carlos, sir, and we're glad to meet you. Turns out they were not only identical twins, but they somehow spoke in that unusual telepathic-like pattern as my daughters. Cowabunga! Whatever is up with these twins? And is there something about being a twin that tends to make them gravitate to each other? Maybe that's something I'll investigate and write my next book about. To the best of my knowledge, my girls never had shown much interest in dating, perhaps because of those lost years that they'd been taking care of me when I fell apart. After the initial shock of this first encounter with the Silver brothers, and the post-paranoia all dads possess toward any boy interested in his daughter, we spent the evening getting to know each other. Both were already in grad school. Carlos was studying structural engineering, and Antonio was going for an advanced degree in business administration. Before the evening was over, and after assessing these were good guys with good intentions, my fears had been diminished, if not entirely quelled. More years went by. My pair of twins, as well as my daughters, completed their graduate degrees. Honestly, I really liked their choices in boyfriends. They were not only always kind and considerate to their girlfriends, but they were to me as well. If anyone would one day force me to share my kids with them, then the Silver brothers, who were from Brazil, would be the two I'd choose. Kids. Antonio and Carlos were nearing 30, and Anya and Noika had just celebrated their 24th birthday. My, how time goes by. After my kids' graduation ceremony, I took all four of them out for a celebratory dinner. Can you guess where? Bingo! We returned to that place in the village before I went into rehab. It was no longer the same restaurant, but in the true Manhattan fashion, another eatery had taken its place. Near the end of our meal, Chris's daughters excused themselves to use the restroom. Their twins appeared to be surprisingly nervous tonight. Sir, first we'd like to thank you for this evening, and for your friendship. Then may we ask you a question? Well, you just did. And please, no need to address me as sir, just call me Steve and ask away. Sorry, sir, we mean Steve. May we have your permission to marry your daughters? Well, that was rather direct. Sir, sorry, Steve. You're a father who wouldn't accept anything less than absolute directness. Touché, I responded. I had given each Silver brother a copy of my Chris and Her Daughters novel a few months back, so I stuck to the script. Boys, I mean gentlemen, future sons-in-law. Oh, to hell with it, sons. I'd be honoured to welcome you into our family, and to be welcomed into yours. You have my blessing. Worry and uncertainty had disappeared from their faces as they high-fived each other and broke out in gloriously wide grins of gratitude. As if we were in a Hollywood film, Noica and Anya returned to the table as if on cue, as we three men were vigorously shaking hands. From their flushed faces I knew they'd been just as nervous about this announcement as the brothers were. Calling a waitress to the table, I ordered another cranberry seltzer for myself and a bottle of vintage 1990 Dom Perignon champagne for the soon-to-be newlyweds. But before the waiter had taken 2 steps away from our table, my twin stopped him dead in his tracks. "Please scratch the champagne. Bulletin in from United Twins headquarters. We're all having what he's having." "How do you say in English?" added Antonio. "Make those doubles," Carlos chirped in. "With a slice of lime," concluded the 4 of them in unison. When the drinks arrived, I offered this toast. May the 2 couples at this table find the happiness in their marriage that I found with my daughter's mother. Giveli. And to this the 4 replied as they clinked their glasses together, Saudi. Prior to tonight's engagement, my twins told me they wanted to attend a graduation party one of their classmates was throwing tonight. So after the fruit-flavoured seltzers, I told them to head off for their affair. I'd take care of the cheque and just grab a taxi. The soon-to-be husbands, who wouldn't hear of it, called an Uber and informed me the fare and gratuity would be charged to their account. Didn't I tell you these were good guys? After they left, I paid the bill, then went outside. The car already there with the driver standing beside its open door for that lonely long ride home. Sliding into the back seat, and after my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed a woman sitting beside me. "Well, my darling husband, looks like we may be grandparents some day." Chris brushed back a strand of her long Titan red hair, then leaned toward me to kiss my always ready to be kissed by her cheek. But this time she hadn't faded before landing the kiss. Moving her lips from my cheek to my ear, she breathlessly whispered before vanishing, "Steve, just keep doing you."